friends, family, anyone else who might see this video, I'm making this as my last dying wish to get you to be a nationalist composer. If you're going to be any composer, be a nationalist composer. In all of my almost 70 years of living, my birthday's in like a few days, that's been the thing that's always kept me grounded, that has really brought me back to my roots and what's important to me. As some of you may know, I was born in 1876 in Cadiz, Spain, right by the canals. It's a gorgeous, beautiful city, and it inspired some of my music. Eventually, I ended up going to Madrid to study under Felipe Pedril, and Pedril inspired me initially with nationalism, and he inspired me with 16th century Spanish church music, folk music, and zarzuelas, which is native opera for Spain. In 1905, I won 2 prizes, one for piano playing and the other for a national opera, which is Vida Breve, which was actually first performed in Nice, Spain in 1903, or in 1913. This just goes to prove that you can be a nationalist and still premiere your music in other countries. And this is how you get other countries to really feel that nationalist pride that you feel for your country. Eventually, in 1907, I moved to Paris. It was the music capital of the entire world, and I wanted to check it out. There I met Debussy and Ravel, and they inspired me a little bit, and I made some orchestrations and I wrote some piano pieces, but modernist music just wasn't good enough for me, so I went back to Madrid in 1914. In Madrid, I ended up writing El Amor Brujo, Love the Magician, and then it was really reminiscent of Andalusian folk music. Then I ended up writing The Three-Cornered Hat, which was an opera that was actually premiered in London, but it was written inspired by Spain. The plot to the hat is, I thought it was hilarious. It's about this miller and his wife who play a prank on the magistrate, and then the magistrate's bodyguard goes back and ends up arresting the miller. And then while the miller's wife is asleep, the magistrate comes back to the mill, but he ends up tripping in a river, and the miller's wife hears it and then runs away. And then the magistrate just ends up putting his clothes on a tree, and then he goes to sleep in the miller's bed. And then the miller sees the magistrate's clothes when he walks back home to the mill, and assumes that the magistrate is sleeping with his wife. So the miller dresses in the magistrate's clothes and goes to sleep with the magistrate's wife to avenge himself. And then the magistrate comes back to find his clothes and realizes they aren't there, so he just dresses in the miller's clothes. But now he looks like the miller, so he ends up getting arrested by his own bodyguard. Sorry, this is so funny to me. And then he gets in a fight with the bodyguard, and then the miller's wife comes out thinking that the magistrate is the miller, and fights the bodyguard because of that. And then the miller comes back dressed in the magistrate's clothes and then tries to protect his wife in this giant fight scene at the end, and it's hilarious. And then eventually the magistrate explains the whole story, and the opera ends with him getting tossed around in a blanket, which is huge satire. I'm a genius. So then, after that, I wrote Noches en los Jardines de España, which is Nights in the Gardens of Spain, which was premiered in Madrid in 1916, and it was a suite of 3 impressions for piano and orchestra, but it also evoked the same Andalusian atmosphere. And that, I thought, oh God, I love Spain so much. I love my country. I love the places that I'm from, and I love my Spanish culture. And I love that I get the opportunity to share that with the world and have them kind of get a glimpse into our culture. After that, it was I thought I was done with music, so I ended up retiring to Granada after my parents' death, which really took a toll on me. this music that you're hearing in the background right now is from my very, very, very good friend, and Alberto Ginacera, and he actually convinced me to retire to Granada after my parents' death. He was a dear friend, and I really admire his music. Just listen to incredible. You'll hear more of that throughout the rest of this video. After that, I ended up apparently not being done, and I wrote the Master Peter's Puppet Show and Harpsichord Concerto. I went through a bit of a neoclassical phase. It turned out to be some of my greatest work. People really, really loved it, but it still didn't make me happy. And just because neoclassical were what the people wanted at the time doesn't necessarily mean that it was the best music and that people didn't like my nationalism instead. So after that, I ended up moving to Argentina, which is where we are right now. So I tried neoclassicism, I tried modernism, and through it all, I ended up coming back to nationalism. I get the feeling that I'm going to end up dying from cardiac arrest in a few minutes, so I wanted to make this video for all of you to pass on my dying legacy to convince you to be a nationalist composer. Goodbye, world.